Hey y'all, have you been waiting for the right time or have you been waiting for permission? Because tonight's letter comes from someone who's spent years waiting for both and just realized they may have been standing in their own way the whole time.
This ain't just a channel, this is BBTV.
Hey there, that was quick, huh? All right, listen, I want to make sure I got plenty of volume and everything's working, and y'all excuse the whirring noises. It's hot in Texas, y'all, let me tell you. And now I've got camera issues. Give me 2 seconds here. Of course. In Texas, y'all. Yeah. Okay, we got plenty of volume, but we got camera. There we go. Hi, I'm back. So, all right, we're gonna get back into this one. Anyway, around here we don't sugarcoat life, right? But we don't beat each other up either. We tell the truth. We own our mistakes, and then we figure out where to go from there. Sometimes that truth is exactly what you need to hear, and sometimes it's the part you've been trying your hardest to avoid. Now, either way, if you wrote me a letter, I'm going to answer it like I'd answer my best friend, with honesty, a little humor maybe when we need it, and enough heart to remind you that you're never facing life by yourself. That's one of the best parts about this, right? So every day, someone trusts me with a piece of their life. These letters are amazing. Sometimes it's about marriage, sometimes family or grief, faith, dreams, second chances, or just starting over. And here's what I've learned: the details may change, but people really aren't all that different. Most of us are trying to do the best we can with what we've got. And every now and then, we need somebody who's willing to look us in the eye and say, all right, here's what I think you need to hear. And you got to be open and willing to listen. All right. Now, don't mistake me for somebody that thinks she's got life all figured out. Lord knows I don't. Okay. I've made enough wrong turns to fill an atlas. I've learned some lessons the easy way, but most of them came the hard way too. So when I share an opinion, and that's all it is, it's usually because I've lived it, watched someone I love live it. You know, if more of us would share like this, pardon me, my fans are going nuts today. I'm just going to have to turn that one off. People learn from each other more than any book could ever teach you. You know, and if I haven't, I'll tell you that too. You know, that I lived it. I learned something worth passing on, you know? And you know what? I would love it if you would tell me in the comments, definitely hit that like and subscribe. Tell me in the comments something that you've learned just from a friend that's passed it along to you, because sometimes those are the most valuable lessons to learn, are the ones that say, hey, this is how I got through it. Maybe it'll help you. You don't have to take everything and do it to a T. Take from each and every one and make it your own, right? One thing you'll never hear me do is pretend life is easy either. It's not. Life gets messy, and I mean messy, messy. Okay, families get complicated. Hearts, hey, they get broken. Dreams get put on shelves. But I've also learned that people are a whole lot stronger than they give themselves credit for. Sometimes all it takes is one honest conversation to help someone see a different path. That's what this show is about. When I first started it, that's what I wanted it to be about. It strayed in so many different directions. But I've decided I want to get back into what it was in the beginning. So, grab your coffee, your sweet tea, get comfortable for a few minutes, okay, an hour, and let's spend a little time just figuring life out together. And um, let's do it with a letter because that's how we started this out to begin with, too. Let me pull that up for us. Because, yes, of course, I have the letter to be viewed. Let me scoot. Okay. Now then, let me read this for y'all. Dear B, I'm 42 years old, and if I'm being honest, I don't even know where to start this letter because admitting all of this out loud feels like I'm admitting I failed somewhere along the way. I always thought by the time I hit my 40s, I'd have everything figured out. Hmm. I thought I'd have a career I loved, a little money in the bank, maybe my own business, and some confidence about where my life was headed. Instead, I feel like I'm standing in exactly the same place I was 10 years ago. Just older, more tired, and a whole lot better at pretending everything's okay. I understand that, my friend. I understand that indeed. I don't hate my job. That's what makes this so confusing. My boss is decent. The people I work with are all right. I get paid on time. The bills mostly get paid. And I know there are people who would love to have the job I complain about. That guilt eats at me because I keep telling myself I should just be grateful. But every morning, I sit in my car before work for 10 or 15 minutes, trying to convince myself to walk through those doors. Hmm. Every afternoon, I drive home wondering if this is really what the rest of my life is supposed to look like. Wake up, go to work, come home tired, watch television until I fall asleep in my recliner, do it all over again tomorrow. Somewhere along the way, I stopped looking forward to life and started surviving it. Ooh, yeah, keep that one in mind. The crazy thing is, I've always had dreams. I still do. I've wanted to own my own business for years, not because I think it'll make me rich, but because I want to build something that's mine. I want to know what it feels like to wake up excited to work on something instead of counting the hours until I can leave. Ooh, I feel that one in my bones. I've filled notebooks with ideas. I've bought books I haven't finished. I've watched more YouTube videos than I can count. Testify there. I've listened to podcasts on my lunch break. I've researched websites, marketing, taxes, business plans, branding, you name it. If researching counted as progress, I'd already be retired. Same. Every New Year's Eve, I tell myself the exact same thing. This is my year. Then January comes and life happens. The washing machine breaks, somebody gets sick, work gets busy, the car needs tires. Something unexpected always shows up, and before I know it, another year is gone. I tell myself I'll start after vacation, then after the holidays, then after I pay off this bill, then after this calms down. B, things never calm down. I know that feeling too. I'm sure many of you out there hit the like button if you do understand. Come on, you guys. All 1 million of you watchers right now. Okay, so lately I've been wondering if I'm lying to myself. I always told people that I was afraid of failing, but I'm not sure that's even true anymore. I think I'm afraid of succeeding. What if I actually build something? What if I actually have to leave the job I've complained about for years? Hmm. What if people expect more from me? What if I find out I really am capable of everything I've been dreaming about? That sounds crazy when I say it out loud, but somehow staying miserable has become familiar. It's predictable. Hmm. It's safe. Chasing the life I say I want. That's terrifying. Agreed. My family doesn't make it any easier. They keep telling me I'm wasting my potential. Every time they say it, I get defensive because it feels like they're judging me. Like they don't understand how hard I work just to keep everything together. But then I lay in bed at night staring at the ceiling and their words start echoing around in my head. You're wasting your potential. I hate that those words bother me as much as they do because deep down I'm starting to wonder if they're right. Hmm. I spend way too much time watching other people succeed online. Somebody starts a business from their garage, somebody else writes a book, another person starts a YouTube channel from their spare bedroom and somehow turns it into a full time career. I catch myself saying, they're lucky. But then this little voice in my head asks me a question I don't know how to answer. Did they get lucky or did they just start while you were still planning? That question has been keeping me awake at night. I can understand why. Hmm. I don't think I'm lazy. Pardon me. I work hard. I show up. I pay my bills. I take care of the people who depend on me. I don't mind putting in the work. What I mind is feeling like all of my effort goes into maintaining a life that doesn't excite me anymore. Ooh, that's a hard one. Somewhere along the line, I became an expert at preparing for future I never actually stepped into. I've spent years getting ready, years learning, years planning, years waiting for confidence to magically show up before I take the first step. It hasn't. The hardest part to admit is this. I don't know if I'm waiting for the right time anymore. I think I'm waiting for permission. Permission to believe in myself. Permission to risk failing. Hmm. Permission to dream bigger than the people around me think I should. Permission to stop living the life everyone expects and start building the one I actually want. I keep hoping somebody will tell me it's okay to go for it, but nobody ever does. 42 isn't old, agreed. But it also isn't 22, agreed. Every birthday feels a little louder now. Every year that passes feels like another reminder that time doesn't care whether I'm ready or not. I don't want to wake up at 52, 54, writing you this same letter with a different number at the top. I don't want my biggest accomplishment to be how responsibly I ignored every dream I ever had. Amen, sis. Oh my goodness. So I'm asking you something I don't think I've ever asked any person. How do you stop waiting? How do you know when you've learned enough, planned enough, researched enough? How do you finally stop standing in your own way and take the first real step forward? The life you've been talking about for years. And if the truth is something I don't want to hear, please don't sugarcoat it. No chance of that here, darling. Signed, still standing at the bottom of the stairs. Hmm. I know it may seem like that, but let me tell you, you're much closer to the top than you think, honestly. Okay, let's discuss this one. Hmm. Yeah, I'm a little bit taken aback by this one, I believe. Ooh, that was not the right one. Hello, come up here. Thank you. Anyway, I gotta get used to all this stuff again. It's been a minute, you guys. So, I want to try and address as much of this as I can. This is going to take a minute. It was a long letter, but there's a lot that needed to be addressed. So I have notes here, so y'all just forgive me. Now, I want to start with the first thing that really jumped out at me when I read your letter. Okay. And it wasn't your age, it wasn't your job, it wasn't even your dream. Okay. It was one word, just one: failed. That's a really heavy word, darling. It's one of those words that we throw around without realizing just how much weight we're putting on our own shoulders. And, if I'm being honest, I think a whole lot more people are carrying that word around when they're, they'll ever, more than they'll ever admit, okay? They'll get up every morning, go to work, smile at everybody they pass in the hallway. They'll tell people they're doing just fine, post happy pictures on Facebook, laugh at the family barbecue, then crawl into bed at 2 o'clock in the morning, staring at the ceiling, wondering where the heck their life went. So, first things first, okay? Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you for being brave enough to say it out loud, because honesty isn't weakness. Honesty is where change starts. Nothing gets better until we stop pretending everything's okay. Now, here's where I'm going to push back on you just a little bit. Failed. I don't like that word. That word makes my ears hurt. According to who? Okay? Ask yourself that. Society? Your high school guidance counselor? Your nosy neighbor that thinks they've got life all figured out because they bought a new truck? Who decided 42 was some magical finish line where every dream had to be accomplished? Because I'd really like to meet the fool that came up with that timeline. I'm 54. Life doesn't hand out report cards every decade. There isn't some giant scoreboard hanging up the sky, saying, "Congratulations, you owned a business by 35, gold star for you." That's not how it works. None of it. Life has never been a race where everybody starts at the same place, runs the same path, and crosses the same finish line together. Every single one of us gets handed a different story. Some people start 10 miles ahead. Some people spend years, literally years, just surviving things other folks never had to face. So comparing your timeline to someone else's doesn't even make sense, because you aren't running the same race. Here's what I think happened, okay? All just my opinion. I am definitely not a professional, but hey, if it helps you, I hope. You know, that's my hope for you. But listen, somewhere along the way, okay, you stopped measuring your own progress and started measuring yourself against everybody else's highlight reels. I've said this before in previous episodes, and yes, we are trying to get this going again. I am a little later than I wanted to be tonight. I want to try the 8 o'clock slot. Y'all let me know. I know somebody's going to watch this replay at least. So anyway, back to it. That's dangerous, because you're comparing your behind the scenes footage to somebody else's movie trailer. Don't watch somebody else's reels. You're only seeing the good parts. The bad parts are there. You need to recognize that, okay? Now, you're comparing your ordinary Tuesday to somebody else's best vacation picture. You're comparing your struggles to someone else's carefully edited success story. And that's a fight you'll lose every single time because most of what you're comparing yourself to isn't even real. I mean, it's photoshopped. I'm going to say it. Now, don't misunderstand me because I don't want anybody twisting my words. I'm not saying settle. I'm not saying, oh, honey, you're doing just fine. Don't worry about it. No, that's not what this show is about. If you've been wasting 10 years making excuses, we're going to talk about that too. If you're standing in your own way, I'm going to tell you that. But before we can fix where you're going, we've got to stop beating the hell out of who you are right now. Let me ask you something, okay? If your best friend walked into your house tomorrow, sat down on your couch, looked you straight in the eyes, and said, I'm 42 and I think I failed, what would you tell them? Would you point your finger at them and say, yep, you're right, life's over, pack it in, nothing left to do now? Of course you wouldn't. You'd remind them of everything they've already survived. You'd remind them how strong they are, okay? You probably poured them a cup of coffee or tea or Dr. Pepper, whatever it is that you're drinking these days. Sit there for an hour listening to them, not saying a word. And somewhere during that conversation, you tell them, quit talking about your friend that way. So, why in the world do we think it's acceptable to talk to ourselves in a way we'd never speak to somebody we love? Why do we become our own worst bully? I know I am. And you know what? Tell me you're not, and I'll tell you you're a liar. We are our own worst critics. Hello, Lucy. How are you? Good to see you, doll. So, why do we believe every ugly thing we tell ourselves while refusing to believe every good thing someone else says about us? That's where I think your real work starts today. Not with starting a business, not with making a 5-year plan. I have a moth friend, pardon me. I am so happy to hear that, Lucy. Very, very happy to hear that. Wonderful is the best kind of word to hear. So, not with making a 5-year plan, okay? I want you to start by changing the conversation happening between your own ears, because if the loudest voice you hear all day is the one telling you you've already failed, eventually you'll believe it, or you probably already do, and you need to stop that process. And once you do start believing it, you're going to stop giving yourself permission to become something else. That's a tragedy as far as I'm concerned, because as long as you're still breathing, your story isn't finished, right? I mean, mine isn't finished yet, that's for sure. So now there's another part of the letter too that really stood out to me. Okay. I have a feeling a whole lot of people listening are going to recognize themselves in what you said. You told me, I don't hate my job. I want everybody to hear that because those 6 little words matter more than you might think. You didn't tell me your boss was terrible. You didn't say your coworkers made your life miserable. You didn't tell me you dreaded every single minute. You were there. In fact, you said almost the opposite, really. The job pays the bills. The boss is decent. People are all right. On paper, everything looks perfectly fine. So why does it feel like something is missing, right? I think it's because we've confused being comfortable with being fulfilled. And those are two very different things. And before anybody starts thinking B told them to quit their job tomorrow, okay, let me stop you right there. That is not what I'm saying. There is absolutely nothing wrong with honest work. Somebody has to teach our children, right? Somebody has to drive the truck. Somebody has to stock the grocery store shelves. Been there, done that. Somebody has to answer the phones, build the houses, fix the roads, keep the lights on, and make sure the rest of us can live our lives every day. Honest work is honorable work. And I don't ever want someone listening to think this show, to think I'm looking down on anybody who gets up every single morning, punches a clock, and provides for their family, because there is dignity in that. There's honor in keeping your word, showing up every day and doing your job well. But here's what I am saying: stability and fulfillment are not the same thing. Stability pays your mortgage, stability keeps food in the refrigerator and makes sure the lights stay on and your family feels secure. Those are wonderful blessings, and we should never take them for granted. But stability by itself doesn't always make your soul smile. Somewhere along the way, we started asking each other, "How's work?" instead of asking, "How's your heart?" We spend so much time making sure we're surviving that we forget to ask ourselves, pardon me, whether we're actually living. Then you said something that honestly hit me right in the chest. Every morning you sit in the parking lot trying to convince yourself to walk inside. Okay, I imagine there are some folks listening right now who just quietly nodded their heads because they've done the exact same thing. I know I have. Maybe it isn't a parking lot for you. Maybe it's sitting in your driveway for 10 minutes before you go into the house because you just need one more minute to breathe. Maybe it's standing in the shower wondering how you're going to make it through another day. Maybe it's hiding in the bathroom at work for 5 minutes just to have a little peace and quiet. We all have those moments where life feels way heavier than it should. But here's where I want to challenge you just a little bit. Don't automatically assume the job is the problem. Sometimes it is. Sometimes the job really is draining the life right out of you. Seriously. And sometimes walking away is exactly the right decision. Not my decision for you, of course. I want to reiterate that. But sometimes the job isn't stealing your joy at all. Sometimes you've simply forgotten what brings you joy outside work. Think back for a minute, okay? There was probably a time when you laughed more than you do now. There was probably a time when you had hobbies, when you were excited to learn something new, build something, paint something, fish, garden, write, play music, create something with your own two hands, or simply lose track of time doing something you loved. Then adulthood happened, right? Responsibilities showed up, bills showed up, kids showed up, parents got older, life got complicated one by one. All those little pieces that made you got pushed further and further towards the back of the shelf because there was always something more important that needed your attention. That's what life does sometimes. It slowly convinces us that everything else has to come first until one day we wake up and can't remember the last time we actually enjoyed ourselves. That's dangerous because if work becomes the only thing that defines your day, eventually you'll start believing it defines you. It doesn't. You are not your job title. You are not your paycheck. You are not the badge hanging around your neck. Yeah, you see it. Or the uniform hanging in your closet. Those things are what you do, they are not who you are. This sounds all cliche, but you get my point. There They're one chapter of your story, okay, not the title of the entire book. So before you decide quitting your job is the answer, I want you to ask yourself a different question. When was the last time I did something that made me feel alive? Not productive, alive. When was the last time you laughed until your stomach hurt? I'm not talking about jumping out of a perfectly good airplane. Yes, I've done that, and yes, it's fun, but no, that's not what I'm saying here, right? When was the last time that you lost track of time because you were doing something you genuinely loved? When was the last time you remembered who you were before life got so complicated and busy? Because if you can't answer those questions, it might not be your career that's missing. It's hard to say. It might be the part of you that got buried underneath all the responsibilities. And maybe, just maybe, that's the part we need to start looking for first, you know? It's definitely an option here. Okay, I'm gonna get some more notes in here because I'm still going on this one. All right, so now we're getting to the part of your letter. Um, it made me smile a little because I know this place. In fact, I would definitely be willing to bet there are a lot of folks out there right now who know this place too. You said you've filled notebooks with ideas, you've bought the books, you've watched the YouTube videos, you've listened to the podcast, you've researched marketing, taxes, websites, branding, business plans, social media, and probably another, I don't know, 100 things you didn't even need to know yet. Then you said one sentence that made me laugh out loud because, honey, I've said the exact same thing myself. If researching counted as progress, I'd already be retired. I felt that one. Let me tell you. I didn't just read it, I felt it from my head to my toe. Because learning feels productive, doesn't it? It feels responsible. It feels like we're doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing. We tell ourselves we're preparing. We tell ourselves we're being smart. We tell ourselves we don't want to jump into something until we're ready. And, for a while, that's true. If you're starting something you've never done before, absolutely learn, you know, read the books, watch the videos, ask the questions, find someone who's been there before. There's nothing wrong with education. In fact, I wish more people would spend a little more time learning before they jump off the cliff. But here's where it gets dangerous. Somewhere along the way, learning can quietly turn into hiding, and most people never even notice it happen. Okay? Research feels safe. Nobody laughs at you because you bought another book. Nobody criticizes your dream while you're watching another tutorial. Nobody leaves a fantasy or a nasty comment under a notebook full of ideas. Nobody tells your business or tells you your business is going to fail while you're highlighting chapter 7. Look, you can stay in that safe little bubble for years, convincing yourself you're making progress, right? Because you're collecting information. Here's the truth: information and action are two completely different things. One fills your head, the other changes your life. At some point, you've got to close the book, okay? You've got to pause the video. Seriously. Um, you got to quit taking notes and actually do something. Now, let me tell you something else I've learned the hard way so you don't have to. The first thing you build probably isn't going to be very good. Okay. Neither is the second thing. Maybe not even the 10th thing. That's okay. You know why? Okay. Because nobody starts out as an expert. We somehow expect ourselves to be professionals before we've ever been beginners. Think about how crazy that sounds, okay? We give ourselves permission to let a toddler fall down 100 times learning to walk, don't we? But somehow we expect grown adults to never stumble trying something new. Why? Who made that rule? I don't know about y'all, but every worthwhile thing I've ever learned involved looking a little foolish, you know? Somewhere along the way, you fall down, you get back up, you fix that what didn't work. Then you try again. That's not failure, that's called learning. I think one of the biggest lies that we tell ourselves is, I'm just waiting until I know enough. Really? How much is enough? Who decides that? Is there some magical alarm clock that goes off one morning and says, congratulations, you have officially reached the required amount of knowledge. You may now begin your dream. No, no, it doesn't happen that way. Confidence is, it isn't usually something that shows up before you begin. Confidence shows up because you began already. It shows up because you survived yesterday. It grows because you solved a problem you didn't know how to solve last week. It grows because you kept moving after you made a mistake. That's where confidence comes from, not from reading another chapter. Think about learning to ride a bicycle. Nobody handed you a 300-page instruction manual and said, read this first. Take the written exam, and then maybe we'll let you touch the bike. No. Somebody shoved you onto that bicycle, probably gave you one good push, and before you long, you were laying in the grass with skin knees, wondering what just happened. Then somebody helped you back up and said, again, that's how you learned. Life taught us that lessons when we were very little, but somewhere between childhood and adulthood, okay, we decided every new adventure should come with guarantees. We want certainty. We want proof. We want somebody to promise us that it'll all work out before we're willing to take the first step. But life has never worked that way. It never will, ever. Then there was another word in your letter that really caught my attention. You said you wanted to build something that was yours. I don't think that's about money. I don't even think it's about owning a business. I think that's something much deeper. I think that's like legacy. There is something inside human beings that long to create, to leave fingerprints on the world somehow. Maybe that's through a business, maybe it's through a YouTube channel, maybe it's writing a book or painting a picture, planting a garden. It could even be raising children who grow up to make the world a little bit better. Maybe it's mentioning somebody who just needs one person, just one, to believe in them. We were created to build things, not just buildings, not just businesses, relationships, communities, families, hope, faith, encouragement. Every time you create something that didn't exist yesterday, you're leaving a little piece of yourself behind. That's why creating feels different than consuming. Consuming fills the moment, right? Creating leaves a legacy. And if all you ever do is consume, one more podcast, one more course, one more YouTube video, one more notebook, seminar, whatever. You'll eventually wake up one day with a head full of knowledge and a pair of empty hands. That thought ought to scare every one of us a little bit, because here's what I challenge you to do. The next time you catch yourself saying, I just need to learn one more thing, stop right there. Ask yourself a different question instead. What can I build today that with what I already know? Maybe it isn't much. Maybe it's ugly. Maybe nobody ever sees it except you. Maybe throw it away tomorrow. That's all right because it exists. It's real. It moved from your imagination into the world. And hey, here's what I've learned. Okay. An imperfect dream that actually moving will outrun a perfect dream sitting in a notebook every single day. Every time. It's a big step, but it's true. It's facts, let me tell you. So, there is so much that I wanted to get into with this, but we're not going to drown this whole night out. I am going to get into a couple of more things here. Let's see. Hold on. Yeah, I knew I was going to do that too, but that's cool. Okay, so I'm going to skip through a little bit of this because, yeah, otherwise we'd be up all night. So then you said something about that I think finally gets to the heart of what's been happening all along. You wrote, I don't think I'm waiting for the right time anymore. I think I'm waiting for permission. Okay, that's honesty. And I commend you for that. Absolutely. And I have a feeling a whole lot of people just got a little uncomfortable because I think we've all been there. We tell ourselves we're waiting for the right opportunity, the right season, or amount of money, or circumstances, okay? But if we're really honest, sometimes we're waiting for somebody else to tell us it's okay. We wait for our husband or wife or to completely understand. We wait for our parents to approve, our friends to believe in us. We wait for our boss to validate our dream. We wait for someone to, or that we admire to tell us we're good enough, right? We wait for confidence, for certainty, for a sign that somehow removes every ounce of doubt before we finally move. We keep hoping somebody else will hand us a permission slip to live the life we've been dreaming about. The problem is, most people are never going to do that. Not because they're cruel, not because they don't love you, because most of them are simply trying to figure out their own lives. They're trying to pay their own bills. They're trying to raise their own families, keep their own relationships together. They are really fighting battles you know nothing about. They aren't waking up every morning wondering if you've started your business yet. They aren't sitting around thinking about your dreams all day long. They're simply trying to survive their own week. They're not withholding permission from you. They're just busy living their own lives. Then there are the people who honestly don't understand your dream, and that's all right too. Look, they don't have to understand it because it wasn't given to them. They weren't the ones who felt that pull in the heart. They weren't the ones who kept coming back to the same idea after year, right? They couldn't quite let it go no matter how many times they tried to convince themselves it wasn't practical. You were. That's your dream. That's not theirs. Sometimes we waste so much energy trying to explain a dream to people who were never meant to carry it that we end up talking ourselves out of it in the process. Not every calling is going to make perfect sense to everybody around you. And that's okay too. If everybody understood it immediately, it probably wouldn't require much faith to pursue it. Now, let me be very clear because I don't want anybody twisting what I'm saying. I'm not telling you to ignore wise advice. I'm not telling you to become reckless. Don't walk into work tomorrow and quit your job because B said you don't need permission, okay? That's not what I'm saying at all. Think things through. Make a plan. Save some money. Ask questions. Learn from people who have already walked the road that you're considering. Wisdom is valuable. It is. Good counsel is valuable. Experience is valuable. But there is a huge difference between listening to wise advice and making everybody else approval a requirement before you're allowed to move forward. Those are not the same thing. If you wait until every single person in your life agrees with your decision, you'll be waiting forever because people don't even agree with each other. One person thinks you're moving too fast, another thinks you're moving too slow. One says you're aiming too high. Somebody else wonders why you aren't dreaming bigger. One thinks you're irresponsible, the other one thinks you're settling. If you spend your life chasing unanimous approval, you'll discover it doesn't exist. There will always be another opinion, always. Waiting around the corner, okay? Here's something I've learned over the years. Every meaningful decision I've ever made scared me before I made it. Every one of them. There was never a moment when the clouds opened, the angels started singing, and a voice from heaven said, "Congratulations, today is the perfect day." Life just doesn't work that way. Most of the time, you gather the best information you can. You think it through. You pray about it if that's part of your life. You ask questions. You prepare the best you can. Then eventually, you reach a moment where no thinking is going to help. The only thing left to do is move. That's the moment that separates dreaming from doing. Not because all the fear disappeared, but because you've realized the fear isn't going anywhere. If you wait for fear to leave before you act, you'll probably still be waiting years from now. At some point, you've got to trust yourself enough to figure out the next step after you've taken the first one. You have to take the first one, always. Thank you, Lucy. You don't need to know every answer, okay? You just don't. None of us do. Think about every major decision you've ever made. Did you know exactly what marriage would be like before you got married? Of course you didn't. Did you know exactly what being a parent would be like before your first child was born? Of course not. Not even close. Did you know everything about your first job before your first day? No. Life has always required us to learn while we're living it. Somehow we expect our dreams to be different. We think we're supposed to have every answer before we begin. But that's never been how growth works. Growth has always happened one step at a time. Maybe that's what permission really is. Maybe it isn't something another person gives you at all. Maybe it's something you finally decide to give yourself. Maybe one morning you wake up and you say, "I'm done waiting for everybody. I, everybody else to believe in me before I believe in myself." That's a powerful day because something changes inside you when that happens. You stop living your life by committee. You stop taking attendance before every decision. You stop checking to see whether everybody approves. Instead, you start asking a much better question. Am I being faithful to the life I've been given? That's a question worth sitting with because nobody else can answer it for you. So if nobody has told you this lately, let me tell you, if you've done your homework, if you've thought it through, if you're willing to work for it, if you're willing to accept that it won't be perfect, if you're willing to keep learning as you go, then maybe you don't need another permission slip after all. I'm not going to give you permission. You don't need mine. Maybe you don't need a unanimous vote. Maybe you don't even need everybody clapping before you take the first step. Maybe the only person who's been standing between you and the life you've been dreaming about has been the one staring back at you in the mirror every morning. And if that's true, maybe today's the day you quit asking that person for permission and simply ask them to start walking. You know, that's what you need to do. That's what we all need to do, right? We do. All right. So let me get this last little piece I want to put in here. Alrighty, righty. Let's see here. Now, so that's going to bring us to the question I think you've really been asking, you know, from the very beginning. And that's not how to build a business, not how to write a book, not how to start a YouTube channel. You've been asking, how do I finally stop waiting? Thank you for trusting me with that question because I know it wasn't easy to ask. It takes a lot of humility to look at your own life and admit that maybe the biggest thing standing in your way has been you the whole time. This isn't easy for anybody to say out loud, and I don't take that kind of trust lightly. You also asked me to not sugarcoat it, so I'm going to honor that. I think you stop waiting the moment you realize waiting isn't your situation anymore. It's becoming your habit. Somewhere along the way, waiting started feeling productive. It started feeling responsible and safe. You convinced yourself that one more class, one more book, one more notebook, one more plan or gear, one more paycheck, one more sign would finally be the thing that made you ready. But if we're honest, one more has been following you around for a long time now. That's the thing about habits. They don't usually announce themselves, they quietly become normal. One day you wake up and you realize you've been living the same pattern for years. The good news is habits can be broken, changed. The hard part is they only change when we choose to do something different than we've always done, right? You also asked in your letter how you know when you've learned enough. Here's my answer for that. The moment that you find yourself asking that question over and over again, you've probably already learned enough to take the next step. Notice I didn't say the whole journey. I didn't say you know everything. I said you probably know enough for the next step. I think that's where so many of us get stuck because we want to see the entire staircase before we put our foot on this first step, right? Life has never worked that way. Most of the time, you only get enough light to see what's directly in front of you. And somehow, that's always been enough to keep moving. Think about driving at night. Your headlights, they don't illuminate the whole highway from your driveway to your destination. They show you a little stretch of road ahead. And as you move forward, they reveal a little bit more, you know? That's how life works too. The next step becomes visible after you've taken the one that you're standing on now. There's there's this idea of getting out of your own way. You know, after reading everything you've written, I honestly don't think you've got an information problem. I don't think you've got an intelligence problem either by any means. I don't think you've got talent problem. I think you've spent years giving fear the deciding vote. Fear has been sitting at the head of this table making all the final decisions. And somewhere along the line, you started believing that was normal. It isn't. Now, don't get me wrong. Fear gets a seat at the table because it's part of being human. Okay. We all have it. I have it every day. I mean, for the past hour, everybody listening has had it. Fear isn't the enemy. Sometimes fear is trying to protect us. Sometimes it keeps us from making foolish decisions, but fear has never, it's never supposed to become the chairman of the board. It was never supposed to be one driving the car. Maybe it's time to pull over for a minute, okay? Thank fear for trying to keep you safe and politely tell it to move to the back seat because you're driving now. Here's something else I hope to remember long after this conversation is over. Different lives are rarely built by one giant decision, they're built by hundreds of little ones. You decide to spend 30 minutes building instead of 30 minutes scrolling. You decide to make the phone call you've been avoiding. You decide to publish the video instead of editing it for the 15th time. That would be me. You decide to write one page instead of talking about writing an ebook or a regular book. You decide to have $20 instead of saying you'll start next month. None of those decisions feel like changing in the moment. In fact, most of them feel almost disappointingly ordinary, right? But life has always been built in ordinary moments. Those tiny choices stack on top of one another until one day you wake up living a life that looks completely different from the one you used to have, right? People looking from the outside call it overnight success, but you know better because you lived every ordinary day that built it. And before we finish, I want to honor your request one last time. You asked me not to sugarcoat this, so I will not. If you walk away from this conversation and next week looks exactly like this week, and next month looks exactly like this month, next year, this year, that isn't life's decision. That's yours. I know that stings. Sometimes the truth does, but here's why I actually think that's a good news. If your choices helped create the life you're living today, your choices can also help create the life you're living tomorrow. That means you aren't powerless, you aren't trapped. You aren't waiting for somebody else to rescue you. You have more influence over your future than you've been giving yourself credit for. It may not happen overnight, it may not happen as quickly as you'd like, but it absolutely can happen if you stop waiting for a perfect moment that has never existed. So before I let y'all go, too, I want to leave you with one final thought because I think this is what your entire letter has really been asking from the very first sentence. You don't have to know where every step leads. You don't have to have every answer before you begin. You don't have to feel fearless. You don't have to feel completely ready. And you definitely just have to stop standing at the bottom of the staircase explaining why you haven't started climbing. Take the first step. Tomorrow, take another one. The day after, take another one. One day you'll stop and look behind you and you'll realize something incredible. The person who wrote this letter isn't the same person reading it anymore. Not because life suddenly became easy, but because fear disappeared. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped waiting for permission and started becoming the person that you were always capable of being. And I hope everybody listening remembers this long after today's conversation is over. The life you've been waiting for has been waiting on you too. Then remember B's three rules too, okay? Because I'll always be honest, I'll always be fair, and I'll always answer because I care. Seriously. In fact, let's get into that just a tad bit more because that's pretty important to me. And then I'm going to let y'all go. Listen, my rules, okay? I just want to make this clear. I want to leave you with these rules. If you don't remember anything from today's show, I hope you remember this part. Now, rule number one, I will always be honest. If you think you're wrong, if I think you're wrong, I'll tell you. If I think you're right, I'll tell you that too. Okay? Rule number two, I'll always be fair. I'm only hearing one side of the story, so I'll answer the letter that's in front of me, not the one I have to imagine. Okay? And rule number three, I'll always answer because I care. Not to judge you, not to embarrass you, not to win an argument, but because sometimes the truth is the kindest thing we can give each other. Those are my rules. They'll never change. All right? Y'all take care, and I'll buzz y'all later.
Boss be rising, BBTV.